Hey guys, we're going to make peasant bread, or artisan bread as some people call it. So let's get started. Let's get started with what we're going to need. Water, yeast, flour, 1 measuring cup, salt and sugar, mixing bowl and flat spatula. The first things we're going to do is warm up the water. I'm going to double my recipe, but if you don't want to double it, it calls for 2 cups of water. So I have 4 cups here, so let me just heat it up. Okay, so I have my water heated up, and you just want it warm, not boiling water, but around 100 degrees. Now I'm going to take my yeast. A normal recipe calls for 1 yeast, but since I'm doubling it, I'm going to be using 2. And what we want to do is just cut open the yeast and sprinkle it on top of the water to let it activate. I'm going to let that activate for 10 minutes. It's been about 10 minutes, and you can see by the foaming that the yeast has started to activate. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is measure out the flour. A normal recipe will call for 4 cups of flour, but since I'm doubling it, I will need 8. And I always like to measure out the flour with a spoon into the cup and never scoop it. If you scoop it, you will get too much flour. And if I have to measure a lot, I like to draw the number where I am so I don't lose track. Okay, so now that we have the flour mixed up, we're going to add the salt and sugar. Normal recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of sugar and 2 teaspoons of salt. So I have 2 tablespoons of sugar in here and 1 tablespoon and 1 teaspoon of salt. Mix it up. And now we're ready to add the yeast. Now we just mix the water in with the flour, but we don't want to mix too long. Peasant bread or artisan bread doesn't need that much mixing. Basically, you just want it to be a sticky dough. And now we let it rise. You want it to double in size, so the best rising time would be 1 hour to 2 hours. I'm going to stick mine in a microwave to rise so there's no draft, and we will come back. Okay, so I let my dough rise, and as you can see, it is more than doubled. So the next step is to put a little flour on the table and to dump out the dough. I'm just scraping out the bowl so I can get all of it. Just trying to get it a little bit less sticky. I'm going to just turn it over on itself. I can touch it without it sticking to me. Don't want to knead it. This is not a kneading dough. Okay, so we'll just eyeball the middle, cut it in half. If you're doing a normal recipe, Just leave it at the 2 halves. But since I doubled it, I'm going to cut it in half again. You can do this however you want. You can make it into rolls, you can leave it as one giant loaf, you can put it into smaller loaves. This is completely up to you. Just gonna make nice round balls. And it's okay if they're a little uneven. As you can see, this one is smaller than this one. That's okay. Next thing to do is to get a cookie sheet and some parchment paper. I'm going to oil the parchment paper. Once it's oiled, we can just simply put the dough on it. And now we're going to let it rise until it doubles in size again. Okay, as you can see, my dough has doubled in size. So now what we're going to do is do an egg wash on it. So I'm just going to scramble up this one egg. And take my pastry brush, just dip it into the egg, and just brush it right on top. Now that we have the egg wash on it, I'm going to take some garlic salt and just sprinkle it on top. And you want to be pretty generous with this salt because it gives it a really good flavor. Now we're going to preheat the oven to 425 and bake this for 8 to 10 minutes. My oven runs a little hot, so I'm going to bake it for 8 minutes. And then we're going to turn the heat down to 375 and bake for 10 to 15 minutes. Again, I'm going to take the shorter route and do 10 minutes. So here's our peasant bread or artisan bread. And as you can see, it's perfectly golden brown. This is the type of bread to tear into. You can dip it in olive oil and pepper, or Italian seasoning, or garlic powder. You can dip it in balsamic vinegar. You can just tear it off and eat it plain. This is a delicious, light and fluffy bread. Okay everybody, I hope you all enjoy this recipe for peasant bread. And if you make it and like it, tell me what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe. And if you have any ideas of recipes you would like to know, just leave them in the comments and I'll try to do my best. Until next time, bon appetit!